Well, hello. This is the Patriot Radio News Hour. I am your solo host today, Jason. Joe, the majority owner of the Patriot Trading Group, is on his vacation for the week, and I'm here to keep you entertained or at least informed with the content that I've had on the air for the whole week. I'm going to continue with that, but first, just gold and silver. Gold was up for a little bit today. It's been inching up every day. We had record highs on Thursday, record highs essentially on Friday. Actually, Friday it came down a little bit, but it stayed above 2,400. Gold's just been really working hard. Got record high on Monday on gold, record high on Tuesday on gold. We were in record high territory. It's pulled back a little bit. Just a couple of dollars, though. We have $2,463 on gold right now. I don't know if it'll end lower today or not, but regardless, it's just going up. It's just going up, and economically things are moving, and it's just a smart thing to do. And when you see the things on your television screens, and we've been Joe and we've been talking about it for a long time. Joe longer than me, but you know, I literally joined Patriot Trading Group because an opportunity opened up to run the Colorado office, and I knew the next false 9/11 situation was going to happen. I didn't know for sure what it was. I knew it was coming, and I knew that would be a good time to be in a bigger way in the gold and silver business. I was doing it on my own as a part-time, side hustle. But being involved with a company that's been doing it for decades, I saw the opportunity and jumped at it. You, the listener, should be looking at gold and silver as an opportunity right now to jump on it. I always caution my customers that this is savings. This is protected savings. This takes your nest egg, the extra bit on the end of your paycheck that you still have after you pay all the bills and buy all the food and pay for all the tanks of gas, and you put it aside for a rainy day. If you have an investment, I say it all the time. If you got a hot tip, you got a company you're liking, you have a relative opening up a new business and want some investors, great. But there's always that extra money, that rainy day fund, that just in case money. And with the government doing the things that they do in hands with the central banks and the corporatists of this world, it's going to just get more expensive and more expensive to live. And you can't have your savings sitting in cash in a bank. If your digits in your account during 2020, during COVID, if it said you had $100,000 in that account, you look at it today and it still says $100,000 in that account. Probably should have just spent it on toilet paper. The toilet paper is more expensive now, and you could probably have reselled it for a higher value and done better. Now, that's $100,000 in toilet paper is going to take up a lot of space, and things can go wrong. It could get wet and spoiled. But still, it would have been better if you can keep it somewhere, if you had the storage space, because you can only buy about $60,000 worth of stuff now. Just 4+ years later, after COVID was unleashed upon the world, you're $65,000, $60,000 worth of stuff. That's all you can get. And I was talking to somebody about a family trying to buy a starter home, and looking at really bad houses here around Colorado, starter homes that were in bad shape, old, needing repairs, $420,000. Well, that's not what an ugly, decaying house sold for in 2020. Things are out of control economically in this country and in the world, and getting gold and silver protects. It's a lot better than toilet paper, because you could put $2 million in gold in a shoebox, and it won't be long from now you'll be able to put $3 million in gold in a shoebox. Today I have a special. You're gonna like it. It's similar to Monday. I'm selling $20 gold pieces, and I'm doing Silver Eagles again, because the Silver Eagles, so silver's kind of, while gold's been climbing this week, silver's just kind of been staying the same. It's down a little bit today, but it's like in this $31 range now. Right now it's about $30.50. It has a down day today, but wouldn't be surprised if it bounces back. It's liking $31, $30.50. So I'm going to keep the Silver Eagle special. These specials are not going to hold. I was ready to raise prices today. Silver Eagles, rolls of Silver Eagles for $760. And then $20 gold pieces. I was getting ready to go on the air. It was going to be $26.50. If you go to allamericangold.com, the full price of a $20 Liberty, because of gold's rise over the last 4 to 5 days of business days, we have them at $2,675. I was going on the air for $2,650, and then Joe texted into the office like, let's go hot. Apparently we got some that are a lot cheaper than selling at $2,650. So crazy as it is, as gold's going up, we're going to go back to Monday's special, $25.95 for $20 Liberties. So you're saving $80 off the website price, and that is where gold $20 Liberties are headed. $26.75, $26.85, $2,700. We're not very far away from Patriot Trading Group selling $20 Liberties for $2,700. So $20 Liberties, $25.95. It's pretty much a stunner of a sale on 1 ounce gold pieces. $760 for a roll of Silver Eagles. 800-951-0592. Call the number, get your gold and silver. 800-951-0592. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. This is Jason, solo host, Patriot Radio News Hour this week. Joe on vacation. Those gold and silver specials, once just to let you know, call that number, 800-951-0592. And get yourself stacking. This week I've been doing a long show that's, a history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind by Stephen Mitford Goodson. I'm finishing up with part 3, Napoleon and the Bank of France. We're going to do that, and then I'll move on to a little bit of part 4. Tomorrow I'll be skipping to part 6. It just goes better with the shows that I'm doing, this one and the Half Empty Cup of Joe. I'll come back to chapter 5 on Friday. I'm going to try to get as much done as I can. There is actually 8 parts. Just can't get it all done, but it's good content. I'll maybe in the future be able to roll some more of this out. But if you want to know who the they are, who is the they? What do they do, and who are they? You're going to hear a lot of names throughout history that create central banks and create the problems that bankrupt a nation. And you're going to hear a lot of it with the historical stuff. You're going to hear a lot of stuff that sounds like today by listening to what happened years and even centuries ago. Here we go. Here's the last part of Chapter 3, Napoleon and the Bank of France.
See any virtue in competition of this kind. On the 22nd of April, 1806, a new act was passed, which replaced the 3-member Central Committee with a governor and 2 deputy governors. These appointments were personally vetted by Napoleon. The new act also increased the bank's capital to 90 million francs. Napoleon was so suspicious and distrustful of bankers that he personally supervised the operations of the Treasury, lest the secrets of his monetary policies leak out and be exploited by speculators. He was thus his own banker, who controlled both the creation and distribution of money and credit to the chagrin of the international bankers, particularly the Rothschilds, who were virtually excluded from operating in continental markets. Napoleon made the franc the most stable currency in Europe. After France had abandoned the loan markets of the City of London, a fog of depression settled on its fraternity of bankers and usurers. In typical fashion, the English press began to stir up trouble for Napoleon. He was accused of having not observed the conditions of the Treaty of Amiens, which had been signed between England and France on the 25th of March, 1802. Relations broke down when Napoleon refused to sign a trade treaty, which would promote free trade and a modern-day version of globalization, and thereby force him to diminish the autarky and isolationism of his continental policy. England, under the direction of her international bankers, proceeded to bankroll Austria, Prussia, Russia, Spain, and Sweden, and duly declared war on France. The coalition forces exceeded 600,000. Napoleon could not muster even a third of that number, and would under normal circumstances have been compelled to secure a banker's loan in order to arm and feed them. On the 20th of December, 1803, he trumped the warmongers by selling Louisiana to the United States of America for £3 million. A brief period of peace and prosperity ensued. However, in 1806, a new coalition consisting of England, Russia, and Prussia, at the initiative of the last-named country, took to the field. Although the coalition forces were defeated at Jena on the 14th of October, 1806, Napoleon was forced to engage in a series of needless and senseless wars for the next 9 years in order to protect France and her new economic dispensation. He promulgated the Continental Blockade, whose objective was to destroy England's export trade, as he realized that England could not finance her imports and fund her allies at the same time. At the Treaty of Tilsit, signed on the 7th of July, 1807, on a raft in the middle of the Neman River in East Prussia, Napoleon and Tsar Alexander I agreed to an alliance which made them the masters of continental Europe. Alexander agreed to join Napoleon's continental blockade of England and to provide each other with mutual support in the event of disputes with other nations, and in particular the British Empire. At that time, France and Russia were the only two countries in Europe which were not on the usury system and were furthermore not indebted to the Rothschilds. They were therefore the only free and independent nations. However, a few years later, Russia started to violate the blockade. This action was premised on the fact that Russia, a producer of mainly raw materials, had very little industrial capacity and had been dependent on England for the importation of industrial products. Alexander was only prepared to continue with the blockade, subject to France supplying him with the industrial goods, which he had previously imported from England. France could not supply these goods, as England commanded the seas and there was no road or rail infrastructure in Europe at that time. Therefore, in order to enforce the blockade, Napoleon decided to invade Russia on the 24th of June, 1812, with an army of over 500,000 soldiers. Although he reached Moscow on the 14th of September, 1812, he found that it had been abandoned, and the subsequent winter retreat turned into a major disaster, with only 110,000 of his original army surviving. The following year, Napoleon was defeated at the Battle of the Nations, east of Leipzig, on the 19th of October, 1813. On the 11th of April, 1814, he abdicated at Fontainebleau. After being banished to the island of Elba, situated between Corsica and Tuscany, Napoleon attempted to stage a comeback at the Battle of Waterloo in modern-day Belgium on the 18th of June, 1815. All the belligerents, England, Prussia, and France, were financed by Nathan Rothschild, with France receiving a loan of £10 million. After his defeat, Napoleon was exiled to the British island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he died under suspicious circumstances when he was still a fit man at the age of 51, on the 5th of May, 1821. An examination of Napoleon's remains has indicated that he almost certainly died of cyanide poisoning following chronic arsenic intoxication. In such a case, it would undoubtedly have been the work of a Rothschild assassin, which conforms to a pattern repeated consistently during the past 2 centuries of assassinating all leaders who propose, institute, or maintain systems of usury-free banking. As part of Napoleon's plan to assimilate Jews into French society, he issued a decree in 1808 ordering all Jews to adopt surnames and to use those names on all documents. Napoleon, in a letter to his younger brother Jerome, written in 1808, states, "I have undertaken to reform the Jews, but I have not endeavored to draw more of them into my realm. It is necessary to reduce, if not destroy, the tendency of Jewish people to practice a very great number of activities that are harmful to civilization and to public order in society in all the countries of the world. It is necessary to stop the harm by preventing it. To prevent it, it is necessary to change the Jews. Once part of their youth will take its place in our armies, they will cease to have Jewish interests and sentiments. Their interests and sentiments will be French." Achievements of the French state banking system. As part of the Code Napoleon, Code Civil de Francais, Napoleon introduced a new commercial code on the 21st of March, 1804. These economic reforms, which included substantially reduced taxes, quickly turned the French economy around and resulted in increased trade and the development of new industries such as cotton making and sugar beet, which were assisted by tariffs against foreign goods and low interest rate loans. The infrastructure was upgraded on a vast scale not only in France, but throughout Western Europe, with the construction of 20,000 miles, 32,186 kilometers, of imperial roads and 12,000 miles, 19,312 kilometers, of regional roads, almost 1,000 miles, 1,609 kilometers of canals, bridges, and dredging, and expansion of harbors such as Cherbourg and Dunkirk, waterworks and public buildings, such as the Gallery at the Louvre, all financed with interest-free money from the Banque de France. Napoleon also established an industrial board, which provided data and information to French industry, the Imperial University, which administered French education, specialized schools, or lycée, for the study of engineering, science, and technology, and professional schools devoted to midwifery, obstetrics, and veterinary science. Napoleon described these accomplishments to his Irish doctor, Barry O'Meara, on the island of St. Helena, and said that they were his most enduring monument. "The Allied powers cannot take from me hereafter the great public works I have executed, the roads which I have made over the Alps, and the seas I have united. They cannot place their feet to improve where mine have not been before. They cannot take from the code of laws which I formed, and which will go down to posterity." In conclusion, we may consider some of Napoleon's achievements, which he communicated to his former chamberlain and constant companion for 18 months on St. Helena, Comte de las Casas. I inspired France and Europe with new ideas which will never be forgotten. France's finances are the best in the world. To whom does she owe them? If I had not been overthrown, I would have made a complete change in the appearance of commerce as well as of industry. The efforts of the French people were extraordinary. Prosperity and progress were growing immeasurably. Enlightenment was making giant strides. New ideas were everywhere heard and published, for I took pains to introduce science among the people. If I had been given time, there would soon have been no more artisans in France. They would all have become artists. A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind, by Stephen Mitford Goodson. Chapter 4. A Century of Struggle. Rothschild versus the People.
This is chapter 4, as he said, so a little deeper dive into Rothschild. This will be for the balance of the show.
Who hold the balance of the world? Who reign o'er Congress, whether royalist or liberal? Who roust the shirtless patriots of Spain that make old Europe's journals squeak and gibber? Who keep the world both old and new in pain or pleasure? Who make politics run glibber all? The shade of Bonaparte's noble daring, Jew Rothschild and his fellow Christian Baring. Lord Byron, 12th Canto. Central Banking in the United States. As this section will show, all previous encounters which the United States has experienced with central banking have been very negative. During the colonial period, the American colonies created their own paper money. The first colony to do so was Massachusetts in 1691. Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, and Maryland soon followed suit. They called their currency colonial script, or bills of credit. It freed them from the control of the English banks and enabled them to run their financial affairs in an inflation-free environment with few taxes. Throughout the colonies sustained, stable economic growth and prosperity were achieved, which would not have been possible under a privately run banking system based on usury. In 1763, American statesman Benjamin Franklin, 1706 to 1790, visited London, where he was shocked to observe slum conditions and the wide prevalence of poverty. When the British Parliament asked Franklin to explain the source of prosperity of the American colonies, he replied as follows: "That is simple. In the colonies, we issue our own money. It is called colonial script. We issue it in proportion to the demands of trade and industry to make the products pass easily from the producers to the consumers. In this manner, creating for ourselves our own money, we control its purchasing power, and we have no interest to pay anyone." The following year, in 1764, the Bank of England introduced a currency bill which severely restricted the colonies' rights to issue their own money and forbade its legal tender status for the payment of private and public debts. Instead, the bank ordered them to issue bonds at interest and sell them to the Bank of England in exchange for English money. In the event, only half of the currency was remitted. As a consequence of this law, the economy of the colonies collapsed, and within 1 year, more than half the population became unemployed and destitute. The Stamp Act of 1765 was the last straw, but the abolition of the colonial currency was the primary cause of the revolution. One of the first tasks entrusted to the Second Continental Congress, which convened for the first time on the 10th of May, 1775, was to issue its own currency, largely to finance its war expenditures. A total of $241,552,788 was issued during the currency's existence. The Bank of England quickly responded. Hundreds of workmen were recruited, and soon millions of dollars worth of counterfeit banknotes were rolling off the printing presses and being shipped to New York. The continental dollar retained much of its purchasing power during the first 2 years of its issuance, but once the English counterfeit banknotes started to increase in circulation, its value soon fell away, and by 1780, $1 was worth only 2.5 cents. 15 years later, in 1790, the Bank of England mounted another similar operation, when it employed over 400 workmen in 17 factories in southern and central England to print the assignat, which was the currency of revolutionary France. The assignat, which was backed by clerical lands, was in its initial stages successfully circulated as a means of exchange, and a significant portion of the national debt was repaid. However, by 1792, the massive infusion of counterfeit notes soon caused the assignat to plummet in value, and thereafter there was a brief period of hyperinflation. On the 14th of April, 1803, Napoleon Bonaparte introduced the government-issued franc, which acquired the status of legal tender in 1808. Already in 1781, before the conclusion of the War of Independence on the 11th of April 1783, Robert Morris, 1734 to 1806, Superintendent of Finance, introduced a bill which restored the new state to servitude with the establishment of the Bank of North America. This bank commenced operations on the 4th of January, 1782. It attracted large deposits of silver and gold coin and bills of exchange obtained through loans from France and the Netherlands, which enabled it to issue paper currency on the strength of these reserves. Between 1791 and 1796, inflation surged by 72%. In 1795, the state of Pennsylvania withdrew its jurisdiction on account of alarming foreign influence and fictitious credit. On the 25th of February, 1791, the Bank of North America was succeeded by a second central bank, which was chartered as the first bank of the United States. It was imposed as a result of the intrigues of Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury, whose actions indicate that he was working hand in glove with the directors of the Bank of England, as it was modeled on that bank. The new bank had a capital of $10 million, of which 20% was held by the U.S. government and the balance by private investors. The bank was strongly opposed by future presidents John Adams, James Madison, and Thomas Jefferson, then Secretary of State, who would later state that the central bank is an institution of the most deadly hostility existing against the principles and form of our Constitution. I believe that the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies.
Jefferson's quote is something you may have heard before, but I'll replay it on the other side.
Yes,
got an outstanding gold special. And I've heard it from a lot of people. Oh, gold is so expensive. Gold is so expensive. For people that want to buy, but they talk about not, hey, it's too much. It's too high. Gold is always very expensive. It always has been very expensive. That's why it's called a precious metal. Getting your hands on it should be something that you have a goal to get to. If you haven't bought gold before, it would be a good goal for you to get yourself an ounce of gold. Today's special would be a great way to jump in. We have $20 Liberties for $2,595. I was coming on the show with a special for $2,650. That special would have been $25 off the website price, the allamericangold.com. You can go to allamericangold.com, check out our prices. Joe was able to get us a call before the show and go a lot hotter on this special because apparently there's a lot more room there than I thought. So $2,595. I don't suspect when Joe gets back on Monday that this is going to be the price. I mean, gold could have a pullback, who knows day to day, but from the trajectory of gold in 2024 and what's going on, it looks very likely that $20 gold pieces below $2,600 those days are numbered. 800-951-0592. You can get rolls of Silver Eagles if you want to get some silver. Rolls of Silver Eagles, $760. Same number. Order it as much as you can. 800-951-0592. This piece that you're listening to, I've been playing it all week. I'll be finishing the week playing as much as I can get on the air. A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind. It's by Stephen Mitford Goodson, who died in 2018. It was narrated by this gentleman which kept himself anonymous just because he sees the materials being very valuable for people to hear. We got into the part where the brand new country of America is dealing with the early pushes for central banking. Alexander Hamilton wants to shove his Bank of England down the new country's throat, which means we have fought the war in vain. Independence means independent, not we run our country at our own expense and then pay their bank money every year. That's exactly what Alexander Hamilton wanted. Thomas Jefferson. If you ever look this show up, it's a very long piece, but there's a lot of stuff to look at. I can't sit here and just read all the quotes and all that and see all these. There's lots of good content that you can see. There's a picture here as we're going to go back into Thomas Jefferson's quotes about a central bank and how dangerous it is. He's got a quote here. It's very interesting. Was the government to prescribe to us our medicine and diet, our bodies would be in such keeping as our souls are today. Obviously, the new country having a lot of problems and trying to get their feet, under them and become something special. It was felt that there was a lot of work to be done. That the soul of the nation was in decay because that's why they were breaking free to begin with, and diet and medicine prescribed by our government. And it's funny, that's where we are today. The government is controlling what we essentially see for our diet and our medicine. But let's continue on with the piece.
Thomas Jefferson, then Secretary of State, who would later state that the central bank is an institution of the most deadly hostility existing against the principles and form of our Constitution. I believe that the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. Already they have raised up a moneyed aristocracy that has set the government at defiance. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. If the American people ever allow the banks to control the issuance of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers occupied.
And I'll add to that, the Constitution needed to be ratified by 13 colonies, and so there was some compromise that happened from the real constitutionalists. And Thomas Jefferson wanted an amendment to the Constitution that said that the Treasury of the United States would not have the power of borrowing, that they are forbidden to borrow. And that just makes sense. If the Treasury does not have the power of borrowing, then you can't have a central bank. Because that's how the central bank has its power. It gets people, countries, institutions, states, cities into debt. And that's how they become powerful over you. If the Treasury didn't have the ability to borrow, then the Treasury would be forever taxed with the responsibility of creating the money. And then when we vote people into Congress and the Senate, when we put our elected officials there for the federal finance, which shouldn't be as big as it is, the government shouldn't be as big as it is. If there were guys in Washington that were doing dirty deeds, we would just vote new people in. But with the banking system we have today, you cannot vote new people in. The bank has bought them all. Remember, the debt owns everything, and everybody is either like we saw the statement earlier from Rothschild. Most people are either interested in the gains of the system, or they just don't understand the system. And in that situation, they'll be fully in power, which is where we stand today. Let's continue.
The following year, the bank organized the first crash, known as the Panic of 1792. By flooding the market with cheap loans and suddenly calling most of them in, the bank precipitated a 25% plunge in the price of 6% Treasury bonds, which resulted in financial chaos. By the end of 1795, the bank had lent $6 million to government, or 60% of its capital. As the bank was allegedly concerned about the stability of government finances, it demanded partial repayment of this loan. The government did not have the funds available and was therefore forced to sell its shareholding in the bank between the years 1796 and 1802. By means of this cunning ruse, the bank became 100% privately owned, of which 75% of the shares were held by foreigners. In 1811, the bank's charter came up for renewal. The bank was concealing its profits, operating in a clandestine manner, and was believed to be unconstitutional. It was designed primarily to serve the business interests of the North at the expense of the agricultural development of the South, while the Democrats, Republicans, Jeffersonians wanted to abolish it. Former President Thomas Jefferson was one of those who violently opposed renewal of the bill. What particularly irked the legislators was the fact that the bank was now 100% in the ownership of foreigners. The press variously described the central bank bill as a great swindle, a vulture, a viper, and a cobra. Furthermore, they contended that it was the constitutional right of Congress to regulate weights and measures and issue coined money. The bill was defeated by a wafer-thin margin of 65 to 64 votes, which was an achievement, as there is a strong likelihood that many of the yes votes were bought. On the 3rd of March, 1811, the bank finally closed its doors. When the principal shareholder of the First Bank of the United States, Mayor Amschel Rothschild, heard about the deep dissension regarding the renewal of the bank's charter, he flew into a rage and declared that either the application for renewal of the charter is granted, or the United States will find itself involved in a most disastrous war.
So our Congress got rid of the central bank, and Rothschild's like, well, there's going to be a war. They got rid of the bank in 1811. Well, the War of 1812, if you really have ever wondered why it's the War of 1812 and not the War of 1816 or the War of 1808, you got rid of the bank. And then the bank decided to send the Bank of England and the British. 800-951-0592. Jump on those gold and silver specials today. Things like this is what got me into it, is learning about, the history of financially of this country and the world. I backed it up just a few moments because I want everyone to hear, I wish we had people in this country that could eliminate central banking and bring the power back to the people. We don't have those people. Now, in the next months and years, you may start to hear a louder, hey, let's get rid of the Fed, let's get rid of the Fed. And that's all great, and I will be in favor of it. But another thing you'll hear is, well, what will we replace it with? The way to look at it is if you have cancer, okay, someone in your family is diagnosed with cancer. Well, let's get rid of the cancer, yeah. And then here's what you don't want to hear. Well, what are we going to replace it with? No, I think you just want to get rid of the cancer. You don't want to replace it with a different cancer, and that's something to be very careful of. And it's very possible the central bank will be possibly something that's talked about in the election coming up. But afterwards, it's very possible there's getting to be a lot of more people in Washington, D.C. that are finally understanding what a central bank is. A lot of those people have no idea what's going on. I mean, just nothing. Most of our elected officials have no idea any of this stuff, not even close. And be careful of the we're gonna end the Fed. Yeah, it sounds really good. And then suddenly, we're gonna replace it with this central bank digital currency that's run by the International Monetary Fund. It's an international monetary fund. They don't have any specific beef on Republicans or Democrats. They're unconcerned. They're just going to be a business that's going to run our money. Nope, ain't going to work. You know, the International Monetary Fund has been destroying Argentina for decades and many other countries across the world. It's actually a lot worse than the Fed, but they're all working together. So let's listen to what happened to that first bank in the United States, where by one vote we didn't renew the charter. And then listen to what Rothschild has to say about these pathetic Americans stepping on his agenda.
Stealing its profits, operating in a clandestine manner, it was believed to be unconstitutional. It was designed primarily to serve the business interests of the North at the expense of the agricultural development of the South, while the Democrats, Republicans, Jeffersonians wanted to abolish it. Former President Thomas Jefferson was one of those who violently opposed renewal of the bill. What particularly irked the legislators was the fact that the bank was now 100% in the ownership of foreigners. The press variously described the central bank bill as a great swindle, a vulture, a viper, and a cobra. Furthermore, they contended that it was the constitutional right of Congress to regulate weights and measures and issue coined money. The bill was defeated by a wafer-thin margin of 65 to 64 votes, which was an achievement, as there is a strong likelihood that many of the yes votes were bought. On the 3rd of March, 1811, the bank finally closed its doors. When the principal shareholder of the First Bank of the United States, Mayor Amschel Rothschild, heard about the deep dissension regarding the renewal of the bank's charter, he flew into a rage and declared that either the application for renewal of the charter is granted, or the United States will find itself involved in a most disastrous war. He also said that, I will teach those impudent Americans a lesson and bring them back to colonial status. Rothschild tried to influence the British Prime Minister Spencer Perceval into declaring war on the United States in order to resurrect his privately owned central bank. In 1807, Perceval joined the cabinet as Chancellor of the Exchequer. At that time, England was at war with France, and one of his principal tasks was to raise money in order to finance the war. Instead of increasing taxes, he raised a number of loans, initially from the Barings Bank, and thereafter mainly from the Rothschilds. Perceval's secretary was John Charles Harries, who had been appointed to that position 5 years previously. Harries was an intimate of Nathan Rothschild, and until his death in 1858, faithfully served the Rothschild cause in the various positions he held in the British government as First Lord of the Treasury, Commissary General to the Army, and Chancellor of the Exchequer. Meanwhile, Rothschild agent provocateurs were stoking up discontent in North America. In order to provoke the Americans, the British started to interfere with U.S. trade with France, which had imposed a continental blockade against England. As the Royal Navy was short of sailors, they engaged in forced recruitment or impressment of American sailors. They also supplied the Indian tribes, and in particular the Shawnee chief Tecumseh, with arms in order to frustrate and curtail the settlers' westward expansion. The Americans, on their part, indicated a desire to seize parts of Canada. Concurrently, Perceval was facing increased pressure from Nathan Rothschild to make a declaration of war on the United States. He refused. The British Army was already bogged down in a stalemate situation in Spain and Portugal, the Peninsular War of 1808 to 1814, with Napoleon's forces, and he had no desire to commit more troops and treasure, financed by more interest-bearing bank loans, simply in order to save Rothschild's sinking banking interests in America. The assassin of Spencer Perceval, John Bellingham, was born about 1769 in St. Neots, Huntingdonshire. From 1800 to 1802, he worked in Arkhangelsk as an agent for importers and exporters. He returned to Russia in 1804, and in November of that year, he was falsely accused of having reneged on a debt of 4,890 rubles, which subsequently led to his imprisonment for 4 years. On his release, Bellingham took up residence in Duke Street, Liverpool. He unsuccessfully petitioned the government for compensation. Bellingham, a bitter and aggrieved man, fell into company with two dissolute American merchants, Thomas Wilson and Elisha Peck, who were both keen to have orders in council, which forbade neutral nations from trading with France, abrogated. These orders in council had been introduced by Perceval in response to Napoleon's continental blockade, which the latter had instituted in 1806 and prohibited trade with Britain and Ireland. Their continuation was due to be debated in Parliament on that fateful evening. Thus we observe a confluence of interests, a disturbed and resentful man, two greedy merchants, and the puppet master Rothschild pulling the strings in the background. At 5:15 p.m. on the 11th of May, 1812, as Perceval entered the lobby of the House of Commons, Bellingham stepped forward and shot him in the heart. Perceval collapsed, uttering, "Murder! Oh my God!" and within minutes was dead. 4 days later, Bellingham was put on trial at the Old Bailey. The trial lasted 3 days. A plea of insanity was rejected. The brevity of the trial was presumably related to the necessity of preventing any untoward disclosures. As is customary with this type of political assassination, the lone assassin theory has to be preserved at all costs. On the 18th of May, 1812, Bellingham was hanged. A few weeks later, after Perceval's murder, the orders in council forbidding neutral nations trading with France were revoked.
Yeah, what happens to you when you say no to the moneyed elite? I guess off with your head, right? We got one more segment coming up to wrap up this Wednesday. Stay with us. Gold and silver, that's what the Patriot Trading Group sells. We have $20 Liberties for $2,595. We have rolls of Silver Eagles for $760. Highly suggest you get it at these prices. Things are moving a lot faster in 2024, as I think anybody looking around can see. You can order gold and silver by going to allamericangold.com. After hours and weekends, during business hours, daily, you can call 800-951-0592. The ladies over there in Arizona will pick up the phone and, be very easy transaction. If you want to pick up in Arizona or Colorado, you simply order the coins, and then somebody in Arizona or myself here in Colorado will call to make the appointment for you to come in. And then otherwise, there's a flat rate for shipping if you're anywhere else, or if you're in Arizona, Colorado, don't want to have to come in, you're a little farther off. There is a flat rate cost for shipping, but very easy way to transact and get your gold and silver. I'm going to put a couple more minutes of the history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind. I think we're going to come back to this on Friday, and because I want to go to part 6 tomorrow, but we'll come back to part 4 and finish, because there's a lot of, this is mostly about America and the banks and America's history with these central banks, which is really strong information that you should really try to understand.
In the United States House of Representatives, Henry Clay, who was a Freemason, led a group of young Democratic Republicans known as the War Hawks. The vote to declare war was decided on the 1st of June, 1812, by 79 votes to 49, with all 39 Federalists voting to support it. In the Senate, the vote was decided by 19 to 13 votes. As there was no unanimity, critics frequently referred to it as Mr. Madison's War. In England, Perceval's successor, Lord Robert Liverpool, was an enthusiastic supporter of the war. However, neither belligerent was able to achieve its objectives, except Nathan Rothschild, who realized his aim of setting up the Second Bank of the United States on the 10th of April, 1816. When hostilities ceased over 2 years later, on the 24th of August, 1814, over 24,000 lives had been lost. The war was very costly to the United States in financial terms. It incurred a huge war debt of $105 million relative to its population of 8 million. As a result thereof, the national debt increased by 182%, from $45 million in 1812 to $127 million in 1815. Peace was signed in Ghent, Belgium, on the 24th of December, 1814. The Second Bank of the United States had an enlarged capital of $35 million. The bank immediately established a large number of branch banks to lend fiat money at compound rates of interest. In 1822, President James Monroe appointed Nicholas Biddle president of the bank. Biddle had first made contact with the Rothschilds while on government business in Paris in 1804, while acting as secretary to United States Minister to France, John Armstrong. As president of the bank, he acted as point man to James de Rothschild, who was the bank's principal investor. The artificially induced recession of 1819 to 1821, which was very profitable for the bankers who were able to buy up assets at depressed prices, convinced the leader of the Democrats, Andrew Jackson, that the only way to terminate these abuses was to close down the central bank. In his re-election campaign in 1832, he declared that the monster must perish, and his chief slogan was, "Vote Andrew Jackson, no bank." He stated that if Congress has the right under the Constitution to issue paper money, it was given to them to be used by themselves, not to be delegated to individuals or corporations. He also said that if the American people only understood the rank injustice of our banking and money system, there would be a revolution before morning. Notwithstanding a failed assassination attempt.
Andrew Jackson, yeah, we'll start with that on Friday. I got another chapter we'll put on tomorrow, but one last time, 800-951-0592.